Welcome to CEO Stories, where we spark inspiration and share lessons learned from successful business leaders. Every founder's story matters, and as Teddy Roosevelt reminds us, it's not the critic who counts, it's the man or woman who's actually in the arena. Our guest today, Tien Wong, is the founder of Connectpreneur. He has built a world class platform connecting thousands of entrepreneurs and investors, always pushing innovation and community. Joining me today are two dynamic co-hosts, Erica Buys Grimes, deal maker and M&A authority, whose expertise helps business owners land the right deal, whether for growth through acquisition or for sale. And Laura Newman, serial entrepreneur, former county executive, and business mentor whose advice is as powerful as her commitment to empowering others. Let's dive into Tien's journey, discover what keeps him striving, and learn from someone who truly lives in the arena every day. Tien, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Hey, Erica.
Welcome, Tien.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Tien, let's dive right in. Capital is the lifeblood of a company. Why is it so hard for companies to raise money?
Well, raising money is a difficult process. It's I usually tell our companies that it's like selling, right? So if you want to make a sale, it's very difficult also. And I think that there's a perception gap between what someone who's issuing securities or trying to raise money has for investors and what investors view any opportunity. And like everything else, it's a cycle. So sometimes the market is hot, like it was right after COVID, and sometimes the market's really cold, like it is right now. So a lot of that mentality changes based on where the markets are. But it's difficult in general. Business is difficult in general.
That's a great answer, Tien. Let me ask you this. If a founder walked into your office today and asked, what do I need to do to raise $1 million round? What would you say?
I'd say they need to have a real short visibility towards customer traction. And they have to have a differentiated product and a big market and a great team. So, that's a very general question. What do I need to do to raise 10 million or 100 million? The answer would probably be the same. The investors would be different, but the fundamentals of the investment characteristics and the attraction to an investor would be pretty much the same. You want to see a product that's differentiated, and also customer traction is super important right now. Always is.
Thank you, Tien. And just a follow up to that, how does Connectpreneur help in that process?
Yeah, so we convene investors with founders and other service professionals in the area where we're doing our events, and we just kind of have a forum where people can meet each other and build relationships and go deeper and try to get advice from people that they meet and learn something. And also along the way, have a good time and have some fun. So, we're a convener of these events. And, I know when we started Connectpreneur almost 15 years ago, we were saying, well, this is like a great meal. You want to have great ingredients. If you have great ingredients, the meal's got a better chance of the meal being excellent, So our ingredients are the people that come to our events, and, you put great people in a room and magic happens.
Tien, it's like this idea of creating an ecosystem is so important when we're talking about entrepreneurial companies and raising money. And you really have established Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia as the center of the ecosystem, particularly with Connectpreneur. I know you're on the West Coast right now. You're doing this work on the East Coast and the West Coast. How did you come up with this idea for Connectpreneur? And also, as you were thinking about how to make it, the powerhouse that it is today and really influence the entrepreneurial tech community, how did you grow it? How did you build it to such a successful way of connecting people, particularly in this area?
Yeah. So, as they say, necessity is the mother of invention. So after I sold my company, I became a full-time investor pretty much for several years. I was investing in a lot of different deals. We've probably done 36 or so investments over the years, but at the time we might have had about a dozen. And every single company I invested in was raising money on a continual basis. So it wasn't just we invested in this round, it's a continuum. So I started helping a lot of these founders raise money through my network and through our co-investors. And I was an investor in some funds, so I knew a lot of other LPs and investors. And I was doing this basically um, gratis, pro bono, to help the companies that I invested in, and we were very good at it. It started raising a lot of money for these people. But being in DC, we're not in Silicon Valley, we're not in New York, so we have a limited number of investors here. So I just had this idea: why don't I convene meetings where I could bring some of my portfolio companies, companies that I had invested in, and some of my friends' portfolio companies in a room with investors. And that's how Connectpreneur started. It started small, and um, it kind of grew from there because of the demand, the focus on quality, quality presenters, quality people in the room. And there's just high demand for it. And I knew there was high demand for it because as an investor, I wanted to create a venue where someone like myself, who was an investor, who also was an ex-entrepreneur, and someone who wanted to have the energy of other people, like-minded people, um, go to. When I started Connectpreneur, I said I want to create an event that I would never want to miss. Like, I would change my travel plans to be at this event. So that's sort of like the North Star of Connectpreneur. And how it grew, it just grew brick by brick, one by one, individual by individual, and it kind of grew completely organically. We didn't have grand plans. We didn't have ambition. We didn't want to make money. It was sort of like just to have a place where we could find great deals, meet great people. And it just kind of took off on its own.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was going to say your background as an entrepreneur and then as an investor, I think was the perfect experience to prepare you for that. I mean, it is the most successful event in the Mid-Atlantic area for entrepreneurs.
Thanks for saying that. Yeah, it's actually the opposite. We wanted to create an event that would fit myself and my friends. So that's how we came up with Connectpreneur. It wasn't like, oh, there's this idea and we fit it. It was more, we made the event fit our needs. I think Y Combinator has a great philosophy. They want someone who's lived with a problem. They'll back people that have lived with a problem for a long. So the problem we had was we couldn't find good deals. We couldn't find other investors. So for a founder, if you're starting a business in a space where you've lived with a problem for a long time, then you probably what to do, basically.
right.
Because you've had this, you've thought about it for so long. You've looked at hundreds of different permutations of the problem, and and it's a lot easier than someone who's coming into a business where they're really relatively new.
Yeah. And Tien, that's great feedback. I'll be honest, as an attendee of your events and someone who's on the host committee, you deliver every single time. So, kudos to you for putting together just rock star events, across the region. They're always, always so good to attend. What I want to know here is, at what point did you realize Connectpreneur wasn't just an event, it was a movement? Because, Connectpreneur is a movement. When did you realize that?
Probably maybe 4 or 5 years into it. I was having breakfast in Bethesda with a friend, and two people I didn't know came up to my friend and they started talking about Connectpreneur. And I thought they knew who I was, and but they had no idea who I was. But they were talking about Connectpreneur like it was this thing, and it was a great thing. And I think when I started hearing people, speaking about it in third party, and I was out in Silicon Valley, and people were knew who Connectpreneur was, and had never done anything in California. And at that time, I realized, wow, people know about us, and it wasn't really our intention to garner, huge publicity or become a movement. Um, so, and it still really isn't, But that's when I realized, oh, this is actually a thing. And then I started hearing all these stories over years about companies that have raised money through meeting people through us, and yeah. So then I realized, yeah, we are actually providing a great service to the entrepreneurs.
You really are.
Tien, I wonder how many people you'd look at and say, wow, that's great if they came to you and said, yes, we have no plans and we don't really want to make money. Can you fund me?
Well, the plan was to find deals. Like the plan was to find opportunities and also to kind of it was quarterly at the time when we started. So it was just to get together with friends. A lot of people say, "Hey, can I have coffee with you? Can I have dinner with you?" And I just thought this is a really efficient way to get people that I really like in a room together once every quarter. So that was sort of the goal of it. It was never meant to be a business. It was only meant to be a means to an end for us. Yeah.
It's funny how that works
It
out
is funny because it
sometimes.
became, but there are some issues with it too, because we don't squeeze every dollar out of our work. So it's good because we give back a ton. It's bad because it's not a profit motive. So if you wanted to build a business, you'd have to change the sort of culture. But the DNA of Connectpreneurs is not to lose money. It was never to make money, and it still doesn't make huge amounts of money, but that's not what it's all about in our minds.
No, I mean, I can't even tell you how many people I've come across that call you a mentor. I'm like, how does this guy have enough time to have that many people as a mentor? Let me ask a separate question, which is, so you've built this here in the DMV region, Maryland, DC, Virginia, Northern Virginia, and now you're traveling around the country. You're going to California. How would you rate the DMV ecosystem right now and compare it to other places? I know people are always looking at Silicon Valley, which is the sort of gold standard. You have Boston, Austin, Texas. Where does the DMV rate right now in your mind?
I think as an innovation hub, we're probably top 10 in the country. This country we're blessed with just so many great ecosystems and so many smart people and so many awesome institutions. So I think we're top 10, which is pretty good. Um, so, we have our strengths and we have our weaknesses. And I think as long as we play to our strengths, we'll be okay. And, we lead in a lot of different sectors. For example, defense tech and dual use technology. We're one of the top 2 or 3 markets, I would say. Aerospace, we're very strong. Quantum computing, we're emerging. We've always been good on things like education tech and food tech. So we have our little sectors that we dominate in or that we do well in. So I think if we don't try to be all things to all people, we will work out. And I think we shouldn't compare ourselves with others. I mean, Detroit's a car town, LA is an entertainment town, New York's a finance town. Every town has its thing. We have a government town. So as we leverage the strengths of being around the federal government and the largest buyer of anything in the world is the government. So we should leverage that and just kind of be very. I don't think we should be looking at other markets because there's so many differences and reasons why these other markets are doing well or poorly.
So, Tien, I agree with you that we sort of have to focus on our strengths. And I also agree that we have tremendous assets here. We've been talking about that for a really long time. I do think in the DMV area, our culture and our reliance on the federal government, while it's a blessing, it is also a curse because it's made us a little bit complacent. I spent the summer out at Stanford doing the executive program. I lived out there for a period of time, for months at a time, because I really wanted to experience the culture. Like I wanted to know why it worked there. And it is different. I mean, if you met with the head of tech transfer at Stanford versus one of the major Maryland institutions, you'd have a very different conversation, right? It's about pushing the technology out into the marketplace. Whereas here, it's a little bit more conservative in the DMV region. What do you think, while we want to like play to our strengths, what do you think are some of the things that they're doing in other regions that would maybe be helpful for us or maybe we should consider here?
Yeah, we are constrained. You're right. We are complacent. We also are constrained by the fact that we have lots of different geographies, which means lots of different political agendas, and they don't always play nice together. And in fact, oftentimes they sort of sabotage the whole region as a whole. But um, California Silicon Valley, the Bay Area is unique because there's unbridled optimism out here. There's lots of risk taking. They think big here. They just believe in themselves. They're also not shy about self promotion, and they take chances. And the investors will make big bets. Investors will bet on the college dropout that becomes Mark Zuckerberg, for example. Like, can't see that happening almost anywhere else. So that's a whole different mindset. And you're talking, Laura. I think changing the mindset is really going to be hard because we're so embedded, and there's so much. The foundation of our mindset has been set for decades and generations. I don't think we can ever really change the fundamentals. I think it's better to play the game that within the rules and within the limitations we have. So if Silicon Valley is a baseball town, let's say we're a basketball town. So let's play basketball and be the best at it. And I think we'll be very, very well off if we kind of stick to our knitting.
Yeah, I think you've captured the essence of the culture in Silicon Valley. I think what we're struggling with is what is our culture? What is it that's going to foster this entrepreneurial ecosystem in the DMV area?
And that's a great point, Laura. The DMV is really known for the government presence. And Tien, this question is really for you. Do you see government contractors or federal executives playing a bigger role in the region's like innovation economy? Do you think that there'll be a shift there where the two worlds can actually meet from, the government side to the innovation side?
Yeah, more than ever before. I've been in DC over 40 years. I've never seen the collaboration between public sector, government contractors, and technology as sort of sanguine as I've seen. Since I've been here. Used to be very siloed, but I think now, you look at the defense technology space, you look at aerospace, you look at cybersecurity, there's a lot of collab between the two. You're seeing government contractors have set up venture capital arms, Booz Allen, for example, Northrop, Lockheed. So they're incubating, companies and technologies that will wind up being commercialized down the road for sure. But you're seeing much more collaboration. You're seeing fund managers, private equity funds have been doing this at least for 10, 12 years, and certainly venture capital funds now and angel funds are focused on dual use technology and defense technology, and that all requires collaboration. You see a lot of these fund managers are founded by ex-govies or ex-executives at large government contractors. Iron Gate Capital Advisors. I know, John, those guys, and I'm a venture partner there. That's another example. If you look at the advisory board, it's stacked with flag officers and, former executives at the various agencies. So, yeah, we're seeing a convergence, and I think that's a great thing.
That is great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. A shout out to Ty McCoy and his people over at Iron Gate. They're doing patriotic work over there. To Tien, to that point, you've seen a ton of business plans. You've seen a lot of people that are very gung ho about their business ideas, their startups. What does somebody need? What does it take to be funded? Who do you say yes to? Who do you say no to? And what are those people that are a no right now? What do they need to do to get to a yes?
I mean, there's a lot of reasons why an investor would turn down an opportunity. A lot. It could be the founder, it could be product maturity, it could be dynamics, culture, market's not big enough, technology's not differentiated enough. So depends on the investor. I think if you're raising money as a founder, you got to do your homework. You have to understand who you're talking to. It's just like making a sale. If you're selling something to a targeted buyer, you should do your homework and know what their hot buttons are. And the same thing goes with investors. Study their portfolio, talk to their portfolio companies, figure out, where they are in their fund maturity, how much cash do they have left, how much are they reserving for future follow-on, or are they a new fund? And then tailor your approach to fit the fund's need. I mean, I wouldn't change your business plan to raise money. I see that a lot, which is a big mistake. But I think you also got to stay true to yourself. And true to the reason why you started a business. You didn't start a business to raise capital. You started a business to do something special. So if you focus on that, you will find people that'll buy into it, whether it's an angel investor or an angel group, or, usually if you're early, it'll probably have to be an angel investor. And the term angel investor means angel investor. someone who really believes in you. Because one thing's for sure about an early stage investment is that the thesis on which you have told your investor, you're going to achieve is going to change, and it's going to change many times because you'll have to pivot a lot. So you want an angel who believes in you or your cause or your team. And that's why the term angel investor is angel investor. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, Johnny, but
Great.
I'm rambling.
No,
Yeah,
that's great.
I was
That's great. A sort of follow up is the pivot, right? So that you hear a lot about investors investing in the management team, in the leadership, right? So, at what point do you recommend that people pivot? Like, where is that, right? I'm sure some people pivot a little too early and they give up the ghost, and other people, right? They don't ever pivot and they just go down. So, what advice would you give to somebody around when do you actually pivot?
That is a super question. I have thought about this for years. At what point do they say stay persistent, but at what point do you have to, right, pivot or make a change? And then you have people that are chasing shiny objects nonstop. Those guys never get any traction. So it's a balance, and I think luck is involved as well. But I think if I had to follow a guide, I would follow the market. I'd follow the customer. ICOR has a philosophy, which is that's the NSF program. Talk to 200 prospective customers before you even launch. And that is a tremendous idea, in order to get customer feedback. Because even though you're living with the problem and you know the problem very, very well, you're selling something and you're getting a customer to part with their hard-earned money. So if you talk to 200 such prospective customers, you're going to get feedback that'll hopefully de-risk the opportunity for you. But when to pivot is a really, really great question. And you can look at all the great companies have pivoted. Amazon, Facebook, they've all pivoted multiple times. And I don't know if they could say, the founders, with honesty, that they planned and figured out how to pivot. I think part of it is trying a lot of different things. As things stick, you can go deeper, along the path, but you're always going to get stuck, and then you're going to have to figure out a way around the obstacle and whatnot. But that's a super question. I don't have an answer to it. I think it's so circumstantial, and yeah, but
That was actually an excellent answer. So,
Yeah, you landed that answer, my friend. That was great.
it actually made me think, what do you think of this concept of fail fast? Because I'm working with a company, they're out in Silicon Valley, they were in the DMV area, and they're very focused on fail fast. And I agree with pivoting. I question fail fast sometimes. I mean, I think you need to have a clear business plan and direction. And I love that idea of meeting with 200 potential customers first.
Yeah, I think fail fast is a great way to look at things, but I would say fail fast, but not too soon. Like John Wooden used to say. What did John Wooden say? Like, hurry, but don't be quick, but don't hurry, or something like that. Fail fast, but not too soon, because you might give up before, something great happens.
Yeah.
And you look at Federal Express, they were within a week or so of shutting down, right? And then you guys can look up the story. What a great story. And a lot of great companies have. Elon Musk with SpaceX, he was within weeks of going out of business, and look at what happened. But you see that all the time. So he could have thrown in the towel and failed fast, and then he would have never had SpaceX. So that is, it's a similar question to John's question, which is, when do you pivot? Like, when do you decide to throw in the towel? Yeah.
That's true. Well, AI is everywhere, and that's the hot new investing area at the moment. What are your thoughts on, as an investor, how you separate the noise from real opportunity?
Right. So, I think as an investor, you want to see your portfolio companies or your target companies deploying whatever technologies that will make the company more competitive, better, cheaper, faster, stronger, whatever. And AI is a great enabler of that. Um, so if a company is not, I was judging a pitch event yesterday, 15 presenters, and you I'd say half of them talked about their sort of machine learning and AI capabilities, but they all should have been talking about it, because if you're not using AI abundantly and throughout every aspect of your enterprise, then you're going to be in big trouble soon, because things are moving very fast. So I think every company has to have an AI strategy that's not just talked about, that's actually being deployed. So um, as an investor, I think that investors are probably looking at that. I think there are fewer pure play AI investors, because I don't know if you saw Bezos last week, but he talked about how we're in an AI bubble. He thinks he lived through the .com bubble, so the guy knows what he's talking about. And also Sam, I think, also 2-3 weeks ago admitted that we're in a bubble. So and when you're in a bubble, basically you're gonna have one, two, maybe three survivors, and they'll be huge companies. And let those guys figure that out. The companies, all the other companies that are being affected, they need to deploy whatever AI tools they can find that makes themselves better.
Yeah. That's great feedback, Tien. And if you had to bet on two sectors with 10x potential, right? And me in the M&A field, I always lean into these questions, right? 10 times potential in the next 5 years. Where would you put your money?
In 5 years, I would
Yeah,
say probably I would invest in some early quantum computing startups that are focused on maybe uh, drug discovery, biotechnology, longevity, because there's a school of thought that people are now going to be able to live for a long time,
they've asked for
possibly forever,
yeah.
whatever that means. But you can't get there without personalized medicine, personalized, tailored solutions that we're just not there yet, right? But with quantum computing and with all the drug discovery, you're going to be able to discover drugs, and specifically target exact doses and understand the drug discovery is very, very expensive, laborious, and complex process. Which think about it: if you came up with a cure for a disease of some kind, you're instantly going to be a multi-unicorn, um, so I would bet on that, and I would probably bet on quantum computing related to cybersecurity, because the bad guys are always going to be bad, and we're always going to need security. So, I don't know what quantum computing in cyber is going to do to the current cryptological standards that we have. But I've seen some interesting thinking about how the blockchain could be at risk. So we'll see. But I would bet on those two, because you want 10x in 5 years, which is
Yeah.
you're looking for something that's tremendous, right?
Thanks for sharing that, Tien. And obviously, as someone who really believes in that like longevity model, I get my blood work done every 3 months. I've reversed tons of ailments, just based on the feedback and the data. I've done a full body scan to know just like what's going on and how old my body is versus my true age. I definitely will put some binoculars on those two industries for sure.
Great question, Erica. So, Tien, let's talk about collaboration, right? Because successful businesses, it seems to me that a lot of those have sort of a mind share. If you look at YPO, Young Presidents Organization, you look at Vistage, you look at these people that get advice from others that have made it. Can you just talk about collaboration and the impact of good collaboration and how you would go about it if you were an entrepreneur, if you could start it again?
Yeah, I mean, it takes a village, right? If you want to build something that's lasting and awesome. So you need to collaborate with teammates, customers, vendors, and also with mentors and peers. So, um, how do you go about doing it? Is you have to just start at whatever you've got, work with what you've got, and build from there. So, yes, you want to get advice from people that have done it before. I mean, how many times have you heard me quote Ron Rivera? Don't show me a map if you haven't been there before, because everyone's going to throw advice at you. And you know, I had dinner with Ron several years ago, and that was the best quote I've heard in years, because everyone's giving advice, and you're giving advice, and it's most important for the recipient of the advice to know who's the source, who's telling you, and have they seen this before, you know? So, right? So, I think that you want to get advice from people who have seen and done things that you want to achieve, and model, as Anthony Robbins says, you want to model people success to kind of find shortcuts. And also, not every advisor can give you advice on every topic. You might have an advisor for, legal, or an advisor for financial, or an advisor for M&A, or an advisor for marketing. So just because someone's great at marketing doesn't mean they're going to be able to give you great financial advice. So, and you have to separate that, you know? I mean, I think there's a tendency for people to see any successful person as a guru on everything. That's totally not true, you know? Yeah.
That's such a good point. And so, how do you feel about? So, you get this advice. Do you act as the general contractor for your own advice, or do you find somebody like Laura that is a consultant to try to build the business? I mean, you know enough about it, so at this point, you can probably act as your general contractor. But what's your advice to other people that are starting a business and haven't been through it all and are receiving all of this information, some of it conflicting?
My favorite president, Ronald Reagan, always said, trust but verify, to Gorbachev. So I would take the advice and then verify, like get a second opinion, a third opinion, and then kind of figure out in my own brain, formulate my own opinion, and then go with that. That's myself. I mean, others are more not trusting, but they would take advice from one person and just go with it. Like I'm not the kind of person that does that. So I'll get advice from different people, and then I'll kind of synthesize and figure out what makes the most sense. And then it could be very wrong often, and am, but that's sort of like my personal, style. But I would just say, yeah, I think it's a good idea to verify. It's a good idea to double check things. And also, the advice that's being given to you is in the context of that person's experience, which could have been 10 or 20 or 30 years ago. Times have changed. So you have to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, I actually wanted to jump in on this for a second, Tien. When you go online, particularly on LinkedIn, like there's a lot of people giving a lot of advice right now, and it's kind of like the playing field has been leveled as far as access to information, which I love. But this guy did this post, and he, said he worked for this investment firm, and I completely disagreed with his advice. He was saying to early stage founders, hold the line on your negotiation with your potential investor. And I actually commented on his post and said, you know what? When you need to get your company funded, you don't have as much leverage as you are giving people the impression of. And he actually agreed with me. He came back and agreed with me. So I think you have to put all of that through a filter.
Yes.
How much experience does that person
totally
have?
agree, Laura. I mean, advice has to be specific to the person, to the style of the person receiving it. It has to be specific to the circumstance. That's why it's so hard to take advice and give advice too. General advice is like really could be a real risk, could be a big problem, because you don't have all the specifics. So yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think everyone should be, buyer beware about the advice they're getting.
That's great feedback, Tian. And, unfortunately, we do live in information nation, right? When everybody is just dying for information, and they're going through different platforms like LinkedIn and TikTok and, all these other places to hear educators. There are people that teach what they don't do. So like you said, buyer beware is super, mission critical to our climate right now. So what do you think we need more of today, right? We have enough people out there really giving advice. Do we need more networking groups? Do we need, a hub? What do you think the DMV kind of needs right now to kind of hone in on, some of the noise that's out there to really make a difference?
I think we have a ton of networking groups, a ton of events, lots of gurus, lots of, like you said, advice on YouTube and LinkedIn, and not a lot of clarity on whether or not this advice applies to me and whether it's good advice or bad advice for me. I think that a lot of these advisors are very well meaning. They really want to help people, but it's hard to give general advice. What we need in the DMV, I think, is um, we probably need more collaboration among the different political sectors. Like the local and county and state governments. That would be very helpful, I think. And I'm starting to see that. We see that. I go to a lot of national conferences and I see, DC and Maryland and Virginia kind of playing together nicely, and that's all great because that's to the outside world.
Right.
But I think we have a disadvantage, which is because we have all these jurisdictions, unlike Austin, Texas, which is one city, one state. We have multiple cities, multiple states, and it's much more challenging. But I think that we have great people, tremendous ideas, great institutions, no shortage of sort of, we have institutional money here, but we also have corporate VCs here. But I think we could use more capital, and if we have more capital, then that's the fuel, like John said earlier, to drive ideas forward. But without capital, then we have to be creative about how we build businesses.
Well, Tien, I love to lean into the personal narrative, and I do think that our journey helps us along the way as we're trying to figure out our direction, and I think it prepares us for success. So I'd be curious to know, what were some of your early influences? Is there a particular person who really, made their mark with you, and what did you learn from them?
Yeah, I've been very lucky. I've had a lot of people sort of take me under their wing and mentor me. And, it's funny. So also people that I didn't realize I was learning from or who were teaching me until later. Like sometimes with your parents, you're saying, oh, wow, now I get why they said that, or an uncle or an aunt, oh, I get now why they were saying that. So I've just tried to do the best I can, with all my relationships and learn as much as I can. I think being curious is a great trait that I was born with curiosity, blessed with that, because not everyone is. And I think if you're always curious, you're always going to be open to new ideas and learning. And if you synthesize, if you have to process it and then you have to do something about it. If you can do those things, then you'll be better for it. But I've had too many people have helped to enumerate. I'm going from my piano teacher to my tennis coaches over the years to professors and employers and coworkers. It's just innumerable, actually.
You're very good at giving back, and that now I understand why, because you're just living that lifestyle of giving and supporting and helping each other. It sounds like you were brought up in that, and now you're doing your part to return it to the community. But is there a particular person who sort of took a chance on you early in your career?
Customer.
Like, how did you become an entrepreneur? Did you know you were going to be an entrepreneur?
Well, my dad, my mother, my grandfathers, they're all entrepreneurs. My dad, both of my parents are immigrants. So my dad brought his brother, sister, father, mother over from Hong Kong. They escaped China in 1949. So, but I didn't even know another life. I just worked in my dad's Chinese restaurants since I was maybe 11.
I didn't know that.
And all through high school, every Friday night and Saturday night, he paid me well. And I realized later, much later, that he was paying me to stay away from the Friday, Saturday night party scene. So that was genius on his part. And he paid me well. I was making a lot of money on Friday and Saturday, and got a ton of responsibility. Those experiences are just things that you carry forward, but yeah.
I love that story.
I'm like,
awesome.
We need a whole nother hour just to talk about how that really shaped you. Cause I know those lessons are, like you said, they just they stay with you forever.
Yeah. I mean, the two things I got out of it was hard work is key. So I just saw them working so hard, my relatives, and so I never even thought about it. To me, it was okay. Yeah, I got to work on Saturdays. I got to work at night, and then customer service. And if you're doing a restaurant business and you want to be successful, you have to cater to the customer. And I realized this when I was in my probably later 20s. Like, man, I'm glad I worked in a Chinese restaurant where I dealt with all kinds of people, all types of customers, because I was in a business where customer service was critical.
Right.
I was able to apply that. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, while we're here on advice, Tien, what advice would you give a founder who feels stuck outside of that inner circle and is having some challenges kind of getting into the right room and is not afraid of the work hard that you just mentioned, but really just needs a push?
Right. So we talked about generalized advice. So I want to caveat this, but I was with, we had a investor brunch yesterday, and a really young, eager founder. I was hosting this thing. We had a lot of people there. He comes up with his iPad and he starts introduces himself and he starts pitching me. And I said, listen, we have all these people here. I have to go talk to them. But you have to learn a little bit of EQ. I told this guy, I gave him this advice with love too.
Yeah.
And he listened. And I'm like, hey, you don't walk up to someone and start pitching them. How do you know like you got to do your homework, like I said. So, but I told him, stay persistent though. I said, I like the grit. Make sure you stay persistent. So I think, a founder that doesn't have access. I mean, I moved to DC not knowing anybody, as a Chinese guy in a white Catholic man's world. I was the office I started in commercial real estate had about 100 people, one black woman who was the receptionist. I think there were like 3 women total, and one black man and no Asian. Okay. Everyone else was Irish Catholic. So, and I'm Catholic, good thing. But, you just have to persist, and you have to believe in yourself. I know that's hard to do oftentimes because of the whole imposter syndrome thing, but you have to have some amount of inner belief, and you have to never give up. You just constantly have to keep evolving, improving, sharpening the saw, and eventually you'll find a good contact or a good person or a good friend, and then that'll lead to 2, and that'll lead to 3. And just know that things take longer than you ever think, and they just are harder to do than you ever think. So if you see something that looks easy, you can guarantee that it's probably 100 times harder than you think. Like not 1 or 2 times harder, like 100 times.
Yeah.
And you have to go into life with that mentality. And if you know that, then your expectation level is set better, because you will have less disappointment because you know what you have to do to build your network. If you're a founder I'm an introvert too. So like, I had a lot of, normally on paper, you're like, wow, this introverted minority guy coming into a white world in the South, DC. So yeah, but I mean, if you gotta look beyond that too. You cannot say, oh gosh, woe is me. I'm a, X gender or X color of skin or X religion. No, you have to look beyond that. Yeah. You have to, and not even think about it, and try to reach people, one-on-one, and then develop your network that way. And it just takes a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great advice, Tien. Just people like you telling these stories makes such a huge difference, right? You come here and you are, the extrovert and everything. Working at Chinese restaurants, your family's Chinese restaurants, and you did it. And like you said, you didn't think about, you were not the white guy, you weren't the Irish guy, you didn't look like anybody else or sounded like anybody else, and you just pushed through, all those limiting thoughts and beliefs that most people have. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh, my pleasure.
Tien, when I have a young person come to me and say, or an entrepreneur say, I want to get involved in the entrepreneurial community in the DMV area, the first thing I think of is Connectpreneur and you. And I sent someone to you just a couple weeks ago, a young entrepreneur who is a computer science student, has already done internships at large companies. And he wanted to get dialed into the entrepreneurial community. And you very graciously agreed to meet with him, as you always do. And I do believe that, Connectpreneur has become the epicenter of the ecosystem in the DMV area. what's the future look like for Connectpreneur, and what happens when Connectpreneur isn't building that ecosystem for us?
Yeah, so our vision for Connectpreneur is to continue to stay relevant and continue to do what our true north is, which is to provide a forum for entrepreneurs and investors to get together. It's mainly for investors and entrepreneurs. It's not for marketing people. It's not for lawyers, although we have service providers coming, of course. But the core of Connectpreneur is to help entrepreneurs raise capital and meet each other and help investors find great deals. And we'll always stay true to that core, whether we have 1 million people or 10 people. I don't really care, as long as it's, we're doing that. And it's still in many ways my baby, in a sense that it solved the problem that I had, and it still does solve the problem that I have. So it's less of a juggernaut slash, huge enterprise, and more of a not lifestyle business, but it's more of a community that I'm happy to continue doing, as long as it's relevant, as long as it's adding value. If it's not adding value, then it shouldn't even be. It shouldn't exist. We've been in DC 40 years. I've seen many companies or organizations go and come and go and come, and the thing is that they get absorbed, and other people that are leaders will sort of take the mantle. So no one organization deserves any permanence, because if they go out of business or if they cease to be relevant, then markets change, people change, generations change, regional cultures change. So I think you got to be adaptable, but our goal is not to self-perpetuate. Our goal is to continue adding value for entrepreneurs and investors in our community. And if we cease to do that, then we probably shouldn't be in business, frankly.
I think it's a must attend right now. It's truly a must attend if you want to be part of the
morphed a lot
entrepreneurial
too.
community.
We've changed a lot. We've gotten a lot bigger. We've gotten more regionally, geographically dispersed, which is great. But I don't know, that we don't have grand plans to scale and become some international multi-billion-dollar business. That's not our plan. Are there other businesses that come out of it that will be big? Yeah, for sure, but not like the Connectpreneur community itself.
Tien, you've given us so much good information here. This is the final question, and that would be, what would be that one piece of advice? What's that golden nugget? Or if you want to put it in parlance of a Chinese restaurant, you're at the end of the meal, you open up the fortune cookie, you're an entrepreneur, and you want that one piece of information. What would that be, Tien?
I don't know if your listeners are going to like it, but the one piece of advice I would give to every entrepreneur, and in fact every person on the planet, would be to learn how to meditate and do it daily. And in the entrepreneurial world,
that's not easy.
It's really hard to do, and we can talk about it offline. I'm happy to talk about how I've been meditating daily for like 18 years, saved my life and more.
What do you say to those of us who want to go to sleep when their mind stops pacing or racing?
Meditation will solve a lot of that problem. Basically, that's what I would say. But it's also very hard to do. It looks easy, but it's difficult. But once you start doing it, it's sort of like Erica, you work out, you eat right, you sleep right, it becomes a habit. You brush your teeth every day and you're healthier and you'll live longer. And meditation will enhance your lifespan. Like if you're not meditating, I think you could be shortening your lifespan in a way. And entrepreneurs for sure, because I don't know of another profession, generally speaking, that takes as many slings and arrows as being an entrepreneur. Even my wife has, she has a very good idea of what hell I've lived through, but she doesn't know. And only other people, that's why you mentioned YPO, we all know, because we've all lived through hell and continue to. And, the one thing that is never, very rarely written about for advice to entrepreneurs is the importance of maintaining mental control and staying calm and staying relaxed in the fire, because you can't make great decisions when you're under stress. Nobody can. If you're and entrepreneurship is a daily stress situation. There's all kinds of problems of every kind you can imagine all day, every day. So unless you're calm and you can't think clearly. So meditation is a great tool to calm the mind and to help you get clarity. Um, and I'm talking about like a practical business tool. I'm not talking about, like some religious or spiritual thing. I'm talking about like if you really want to improve your performance, look at the best athletes in the world. I mean, the great golfers, the great basketball players, they are completely relaxed when they are performing. And there's like a correlation. I'm sure there's scientific evidence that backs this. So I'm a big fan of meditation because I think it's a no cost from a money standpoint. It does cost some time, but the return on investment is huge. So anyway, that would be my advice. I know you wanted business advice.
That's so good. That's so good.
I learn something from you every time.
There's no better way to close this out than something like this, because it prolongs the mind forever and ever. Thank you so much for saying this.
It's so fantastic, Tien. That's why at CEO Stories, our mission is to inspire and equip business leaders by learning from those that are making a real impact in the DMV and beyond. It's so hard to make it, and building something that lasts takes grit. It takes mental focus. Less than half of businesses reach 5 years, and fewer still make a successful exit. So on each episode, we share hard-earned lessons and practical insights to help you, the entrepreneur, beat the odds. Thank you for joining us today. Tune in each week for another CEO Stories podcast. Thank you, Tien. Thank you, Laura Newman. Thank you, Erica Bies Grimes. And thank you to our producer, George Mentis.
Thank you, guys.